Hare Jai Jagdish Hare Kesavadeta Narahare Rupa Jai Jagdish Hare Jai Jagdish Hare Jai Jagdish Hare Jaya Nasingadev Jaya Nasingadev Nasingadev Jaya Nasingadev Jaya Lakshmi Nasinga Bhakta Prahlad Lakshmi Nasinga Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Nrsimha Bhagavan ki Bhakta Prahlad Maharaj ki Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Very similar to the painting that's at the bottom right. There's our disciplic succession, and on the right side, on the right side of the altar there at the bottom is the 6 Goswamis, same as on the screen here, the 6 Goswamis. So during this visit to St. Louis, that's been my topic. And so far, 3 of the 6 have been discussed. Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and Raghunath Das Goswami. Who's next? Jiva Goswami. Jiva Goswami ki jai. A little confession. Jiva Goswami is one of my heroes in Krishna consciousness. For many reasons, most outstanding of which is his writing. This, on the screen we see a picture of his writing. He's got a very interesting pen, peacock feather for a pen. I think that's just artistic flair. He was the nephew of Sanatana and Rupa, which means his father was their brother. His father's name was Anupam, and we already heard about the relationship with Anupam and Rupa and their visit to Lord Chaitanya and Prayag. And then from there, Lord Chaitanya, after instructing Rupa Goswami for 10 days in Prayag, he sent the 2 brothers to Vrindavan, where they stayed a whole month. They couldn't bear separation from Lord Chaitanya, so then they went to Jagannath Puri. And on the way, Jiva Goswami's father died. And that news of his father's death came to Jiva Goswami, and it was very difficult. He was very young at the time. So In age, Sanatan was the elder, Rupa was the next, Anupam was the youngest of the three, and Jiva was his son. We have no indication of any children from Rupa or Sanatan, although they were married. And the date of his birth, 1511, gives some idea of where he was in relation to the others. As far as the six Goswamis, he was one of the youngest of the six Goswamis. And you see, he lived a long life, 85 years. So during those 85 years, he wrote many books, and those books were, we'll hear something about those books. There's a whole list of the books that he wrote. That's his major contribution, but I will name another 7 contributions, major contributions of Jiva Goswami, besides just this writing. There's his elder brothers, Rupa and Sanatan. It's described when he was a young boy, he had an attraction for Krishna Balaram. And he treated Krishna Balaram like his dearmost friend. He worshipped them. He dressed them and decorated them and cooked for them and made offerings to them and distributed the prasad of Krishna Balaram to his friends. He had no interest in child play like this little girl does. He was very just fixed in Krishna Balaram. It's said that he had, because he had heard, well, when Lord Chaitanya came to meet Rupa and Sanatan, it's unclear whether he at that time saw Lord Chaitanya, Jiva saw Lord Chaitanya or not. I mean, some reports say he was a little child, some reports say he didn't, and some reports say it's uncertain. So we can't say for certain. But he certainly heard about Lord Chaitanya from his uncles and from his father. And one time, when he was worshipping Krishna Balaram, he was thinking very deeply about his desire to be in Lord Chaitanya's association. In his dream, the deity appeared. This isn't his deity, it's just from the internet. But his deity appeared, and they transformed themselves into Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and raised their arms in ecstasy, and then they showed again Krishna Balaram form. So he had an understanding like that from childhood. He mastered his studies very quickly, but wasn't just interested in studies. He wanted to be with Lord Chaitanya. He wanted to be with Lord Chaitanya. Very much he wanted to be with Lord Chaitanya. And when he heard that his father had left the world, his desire became even stronger. And as his desire became stronger, of course there's different biographies about his life. One was he had a pretext to visit Lord Chaitanya's places of pilgrimage, places in Navadvip. Others, he asked his permission of his mother specifically to go. He went, and he was hoping against hope, and sure enough, omniscient Lord Nityananda, he was hoping he would also meet Lord Nityananda. And when he reached Navadvip, he was told Lord Chaitanya is at the house of Srivas Pandit. So he went straight away to the house of Srivas Pandit, and who was at the door to greet him but Srivas and Lord Nityananda. And Jiva Goswami had a transcendental recognition of him, and he fell at his feet. And Lord Nityananda picked him up and embraced him very warmly and strongly and said, "Are you the son? Are you the nephew of Rupa and Sanatan?" That was his greeting. He came specifically to give his association to little Jiva, and little Jiva requested Lord Nityananda to show him the places of Krishna's or Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, and so that was what was done. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote a book about it. One of his 100 books was Navadvip Parikrama. The second was Navadvip Dham Mahatmya. So in that book, Nityananda Prabhu took Jiva Goswami to the places of the primary places of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, which has then since then become the sequence of places that we visit when we do Navadvip Parikrama, Navadvip Mandala Parikrama, just following the path of Lord Nityananda with Jiva Goswami. It's a very wonderful description. Different things that happened that were quite esoteric, and Nityananda showed things to Jiva Goswami that you can't ordinarily see, like what you see in this illustration. At the end of the visit, there's 3 paintings that show the same thing, but he described according to Ananta Samhita, there in the future will be a grand temple, Adbhuta Mandir it's called, and rising high into the sky to indicate the place of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Here's another painting of the same. This is Pushkar painting of the same. And of course this is a Temple of Vedic Planetarium painting of the same. The wonderful temple rising into the sky. And at the end of their time together, Jiva Goswami's feelings of separation from Lord Chaitanya had been greatly mitigated, but he still wanted to be with Lord Chaitanya. Instead, Nityananda granted him residence in Vrindavan in the association of his 2 uncles, Rupa and Sanatan. So he instructed him to go there. This is one of those multiple significant events where to get the association of Lord Chaitanya or to get residence in Vrindavan, it comes by the mercy of Lord Nityananda. He has that, he gives tickets to the spiritual world. And before he instructed him, before you go there, you should go to Benares and study the scriptures under the direction of Madhusudana Vachaspati. Madhusudana Vachaspati was a student of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, which means he was very learned in all the scriptures. Specifically, the biographies say that he studied the 6 darshans, which means the different atheistic renderings of the Vedas. The Karmakanda take, the logic and argument take, and the atomic theory take, and that Prabhupada describes them in his writings. So even before he began his devotional writing, he was trained what the opposition has to say and how to respond to what the opposition has to say. Because being trained by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Madhusudana Vachaspati knew both. So Jiva Goswami he mastered his subject matters in a jiffy, in something like within a year, and it's impossible. You can't learn all those things in a year, but he did. And he began around the age of 20 writing his commentary on those things in conjunction with the Bhagavatam. His Bhagavatam commentary is known by the name Sarva Samvadani. And he began it and was already famous before he was even left to go to Vrindavan. When he went to Vrindavan, he took shelter, as he was instructed by Lord Nityananda. He took shelter of Rupa and Sanatan. And when he took shelter of Rupa and Sanatan, they were very, very happy. They treated him like their son. He was their brother's son, but they treated him like their son. In age, he was that young compared to them. And one of the biographies says he requested the elder brother of the two, Sanatan Goswami, to give him Diksha, but Sanatan Goswami deferred him or referred him to Rupa Goswami. In any case, Rupa Goswami didn't initiate him immediately. He engaged him in menial tasks to test what he was made of. And those menial tasks included something very similar to what Narada Muni did when he was a young boy. He served the Bhakti Vedantas by bringing their meals and cleaning their clothes, and specifically for Rupa Goswami, it was preparing the leaves, which had to be done in a very, very special way for writing, and the instruments for writing, because that was Rupa's main service. So he was just assisting him in any possible way. One of the other services, because they recognized his scholarship, was he was given the task of proofreading the writings of Rupa and Sanatan. And so he was very happy to do that service. And in the course of doing the proofreading of their writings, he also made commentaries on the writings, because he was Jiva Goswami. For example, Sanatan Goswami had given him a commentary on all the verses of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, called Vaishnava Toshini. So Jiva Goswami wrote Vaishnava Toshini Tika, a commentary on Sanatan Goswami's commentary. And Rupa Goswami gave him a copy of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So he wrote a commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu called Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu. And he gave him Ujjwala Nilamani, and he did a commentary on Ujjwala Nilamani along with... So although he was in the role of just being an assistant, his scholarship was brilliant and effulgent already. In the course of time, he was given Diksha by Rupa Goswami, and we'll see shortly he was given, because it's traditional in Vedic culture, when Diksha is given, one of the things that's given in addition to a name is a deity. So Rupa Goswami didn't just go to a Murtiwala store and purchase a set of deities for him. He, with his own hand, made deity for Jiva Goswami to worship. And in course of time, Rupa Goswami was giving him the teachings of Lord Chaitanya through the writings of the Goswamis, in addition to proofreading. He was giving him deeper instructions, so he would thoroughly understand. Now remember, he's had this training of Madhusudana Vachaspati, where he had some preliminary understanding, and now he's got a deeper understanding. And one of the great contributions of Jiva Goswami was he trained the next generation of leaders, because those who have studied religious organizations, there was a devotee from Russia, forgetting his name at the moment. His service was he's in charge of the BBT, and as I'm speaking, maybe I'll remember his name. Goranga something. In any case, he was requested to do a study on religious organizations, which ones succeeded and which ones did not and why. And this devotee, whose name I can't remember, took him 2.5 years. He did what looked to me like a PhD thesis on a topic. And the summary goes like this. It's very important for us to understand that with religious organizations that succeeded, there was emphasis on the founder, the charismatic leader that started, like Muhammad or Christ or something, that they gave emphasis not on their personality, but on their teachings and their writings. Now, Lord Chaitanya didn't give writings, but the Goswami gave writings. And where the emphasis was given, then it was successful. And where it wasn't given, it failed. Examples, like all kinds of examples. Very, very thorough research. So perhaps you've heard this teaching that it came out of, anyway, with refinement, and refinement was taught around the world at the ISKCON Leadership Conference, the ILS, in Mayapur, many years. Anyway, Prabhupada gave teachings. Lord Chaitanya gave teachings. And Lord Chaitanya's teachings were captured fully by Rupa and Sanatan. And that's characteristically the first generation after the leader. It's stronger, but it fades after the next generation. The next generation in this case was Jiva Goswami. It didn't fade. It's very strong. And he made sure that it would continue because he passed it on to these three, the next in line. He trained them personally, as he was trained by Rupa and Madhusudana Vachaspati. He trained these three, Srinivasacharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and Shyamananda. And we already spoke something about Narottam Das Thakur and Srinivasacharya. Srinivasacharya was, among other things, he was the author of the Sad Goswami Astaka. Some of you know that song. Sad Goswami, the 6 Goswamis. He wrote it, and it's really profound. And Narottam Das Thakur wrote another song. It's Nam Sankirtan, but 2 verses about the holy name, and 6 verses are about the Goswamis. So they're very richly appreciative of the 6 Goswamis, largely due to one of the 6, because he made sure that they received the understandings correctly, because it's easy to get understandings not correctly. It's too easy. So, but they very clearly understood. And then the next thing he did was he sent them on traveling Sankirtan, book distribution, Kijai, by all the writings of the 6 Goswamis put in a bullock cart. Now there's some of the history is Mother Janava, she got an assist. She got some points for assist. And her points were, during the time of the Goswamis in Vrindavan, where Lord Chaitanya had come from in Navadvip, and where he also spent substantial time in Jagannath Puri, things had gone down because there wasn't an acharya to keep them up. That the acharyas were there in Vrindavan. That's where things were filled with vitality. So she wrote to Jiva Goswami requesting, please see that the Goswami literatures are made available in the eastern part of India. And he did. And so it's a major part of continuing the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So now we have already 5 things that are major contributions. His writing, his being the next in line of disciplic succession, his training those who were the next in the line after him, his sending the literatures, because there was no printing presses. It was all by hand. So he had, the 5th thing is, he had arranged many brahmanas to be engaged in making hand copies of the writings of the Goswamis. Because a contemporary of Jiva Goswami was Krishnadas Kaviraj. And Krishnadas Kaviraj also wrote a copy. He understood, how did he understand the teachings of the Goswamis? Through Jiva Goswami and through Raghunath Das Goswami and his own studies. So he wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita, which was the life and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, he didn't write things, but it was written by the Goswamis. So Chaitanya Charitamrita is packed like a rich smoothie where you can put a straw in it, the straw stays up because it's really smooth, but it's very thick. Maybe more like a milkshake. Of the writings of the Goswamis, which are the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, but he understood them and explained them and used them in such a way it was really, really easy. And it was really necessary. Why was it necessary? It was necessary because outside of Vrindavan, there are people that had this piece or that piece or some other piece, and it had become distorted, and they didn't know the whole big picture. So it was the first time since the time of Lord Chaitanya that the big picture of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and his teachings were comprehensively put together. Because many of us in this room will probably not have the time or the intellectual horsepower to go through all the writings of the Goswamis. Where do you see the list of Jiva Goswami's books? Your socks will fall off. It's like, it's astounding. So how are you going to get it? Read Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because within Chaitanya Charitamrita, there it is. And then Prabhupada in his purports has kind of pabulized it. So it's all there. Just read Prabhupada's books, it's all there. References are made sometimes, which is nice. And if you're not the scholarly type, you get all this detail and that detail, just read Chaitanya Charitamrita. Before you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, thoroughly read Srimad Bhagavatam. Before you thoroughly read Srimad Bhagavatam, you can begin reading at any time, but thoroughly study the essential Bhakti Shastri text. Because according to what this nice devotee from Russia did, is when that is neglected, the organization fails historically. He went back, hundreds of years in many organizations, and the ones that failed did not place sufficient emphasis on the teachings of the founder. So in ISKCON, Prabhupada is that person for us. So please read Prabhupada's books. Okay, now back to Jiva Goswami. So he taught these three, not that he didn't have other students, but he especially taught these three, and then engaged them in going out into the world, specifically to the eastern parts of India, to carry forth Lord Chaitanya's message. They're loaded up with full understanding. It's not the only thing they did was study. For example, I've been making reference many, many times in the course of this visit already to a book called Bhakti Ratnakar. Bhakti Ratnakar is a anthology of the personalities in Lord Chaitanya's Leela and their activities after Lord Chaitanya departed this world. Because when he was present in the world, that's in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it's a very important book. And one of the things in that important book was a description of a visit to all the holy places in Vrindavan that by Lord Chaitanya's time had been revealed where they were. And the two of these three in the picture, through these three students, Narottam Das Thakur and Srinivasacharya, were taken to visit them. And where this place was, and where this thing was, and this thing was, and that thing was, and lots and lots of description of what these three students did to qualify themselves to be fit representatives of the disciplic succession, because they're the next in line. Jiva Goswami, his main contribution, again, of course, is his writing of books. Here's a copy of his handwriting and the kind of materials that were used to write on. And here's a list of 25 of his books. And it's not a comprehensive list, but it's the major ones, listed in the same Bhakti Ratnakar. The first one, I'll go through them quickly. Harinamrita Vyakarana is writing just following Lord Chaitanya, because, as you know, when Lord Chaitanya was young, he was Nimai Pandit, and his field of teaching was grammar, Sanskrit grammar. And after he became initiated disciple of Ishwara Puri, he taught grammar in terms of the names of Krishna. Every grammar rule, there's many, 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 and each of the grammar rules had a name of Krishna to remember them by. And Jiva Goswami wrote it. It's a Hari Nama Amrita Vyakarana. Vyakarana is the rules of grammar. And to this day, in our ISKCON Gurukuls, probably in many Gurukuls, it's the text that's used to teach the young students Sanskrit. Jiva Goswami's text. Number 2 is Gopal Champu. Champu is a certain type of literature. Now, Jiva Goswami was such a person that he even wrote a book on how to write a champu. What are the elements that make a champu a champu? And then he wrote one. He wrote 2 of them. Gopal Champu Purva, that's Krishna in Vrindavan, and Krishna after he left Vrindavan. That's the Uttara. And it's a very amazing literature. It begins with Krishna, after Krishna killed Dantavakra, and thus the rest of the demons that he appeared in this world to kill. He was just outside of Mathura, by the western gate of Mathura. He then changed into his cowherd boy clothes. He still looked very young, because Navayovana. And he went to Vrindavan and stayed for 2 months in Vrindavan, according to Gopal Champu. He stayed at the house of Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yasoda. And there were 2 speakers, disciples of Narada Muni, that met every morning and until every evening, where they narrated Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, from his birth through his entire pastimes in Vrindavan. It's a very amazing literature. And then Uttara is after he left Vrindavan. But it's a certain style without going into the elements of that style. That's book number 2. And Gopal Champu part 1 is that thick. And then you see number 3 is Krama Sandarbha. Krama Sandarbha. Sandarbha again is a certain type of literature, and he followed the rules of Sandarbhas. It's a verse-by-verse commentary on the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. So you can see Gopal Champu is something like a commentary in the 10th canto. And number 3 is it's like what Prabhupada did, verse by verse, or most verses of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, 12 cantos, is Krama Sandarbha. And then 4 through 9 is called the 6 Sandarbhas, or Shat Sandarbhas, where he is topic by topic. And there's 6 topics, or 4 of them in Sambandha. Those of you that have been a little familiar with Krishna consciousness, you know this term. Sambandha means relationship, and Sambandha Gyan is that portion of the Vedas that deals with the relationship of all things with the source of emanation. So that those three topics, Tattva Sandarbha, Bhagavad Sandarbha, Paramatma Sandarbha, and Krishna Sandarbha, without detailing how the puzzle pieces fit together, that's all under the Sambandha Gyan, the first four. And then number 8 on this list is Bhakti. That's the activities acting in that relationship. That's the largest of the 6. And Priti Sandarbha, he uses the word Priti like we often use the word Prema, or the stage of perfection, love for Krishna. Then, number 10, Radha Krishna Archana Deepika. Very interesting book describing in detail about worshipping Radha and Krishna together. Because prior, many of you know, prior the worship was just Krishna or something like that. Like, you know, the deity of Govindaji didn't have a Radharani by his side yet. So they put a deity by his side, installed the deity of Radha, and so forth. So he explains in details that type of worship. Madhava Mahotsava, very interesting book. It reads like a novel. It's an adventure novel about Radha and Krishna. And the novel begins with Radha waiting for Krishna to come. She's all prepared, and etc., etc. Krishna's late. Radha sends a messenger. The messenger comes in contact with Shaibya, very haughty. Shaibya says, your Radharani's just going to have to wait because Krishna's with Chandravali now. And the messenger goes back and tells Radharani. Radharani becomes very upset and enters a mood of man, and she leaves. I don't want to see him ever again, etc., etc. Krishna comes late. The gopis chastise him severely. We know what kind of person you are, etc., etc. And he finds that Radharani has gone, and he becomes beside himself with anxiety, distress. They become afraid he's going to leave his body, give up his life. Of course, he doesn't have a difference between himself and his body. Purnamasi comes along, sees Krishna in this distressed condition. Purnamasi starts looking for Radharani. She finds Radharani finally deep in the forest. She's in a cabin talking to herself. Why am I like this? I know who he is, but I can't stop loving him. And it's like she's just revealing her heart to the wall. And Purnamasi hears it. Purnamasi says, "You got to come back immediately. Krishna may give up his life." She comes back. Krishna's really happy. And that's the first half of the book. And the second half, there's a festival where she's made queen. Although it's Madhava Mahotsava, it's about Radharani becoming queen. It's Radha Mahotsava. It's really an interesting book. Gopal Tapani, we're at number 12 now. Gopal Tapani is one of the Upanishads that's very elevated, and he gave a commentary on it. Brahma Samhita, which we have in English, Compliments of Bhakti Siddhanta. But Bhakti Siddhanta is an English translation of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Bengali translation of Jiva Goswami's Sanskrit commentary on Brahma Samhita. Because Brahma Samhita was a book that Lord Chaitanya found and authorized it as, as good as the Bhagavatam. So everyone accepted it. Jiva Goswami was the first one to make commentary in Sanskrit. Of course, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, So he called it, his commentary is Rasamrita Tika, Ujjvala Tika, that's commentary. Sankalpa Vriksha, the role of intention in fulfilling spiritual desire, and so forth. The whole nice long list of other things that he wrote. Number 23, a commentary on Gayatri Mantra following Agni Purana. Anyway, a grand total of 400,000 verses. We heard Rupa Goswami wrote 100,000 verses. Jiva Goswami wrote 400,000 verses. And to give you some idea, some of you know, many of you may know, Radhika Raman. Radhika Raman is a very wonderful devotee, a PhD scholar from Oxford University. And he did his PhD thesis on 3 verses from Paramatma Sandarbha out of 400,000. And it's his writings, 400,000, very profound, establishing the fundamental teachings of Rupa and Sanatana, which are the fundamental teachings of Lord Chaitanya, in a very expanded and detailed and authoritative form. Knowing what the opposing people would say, so it's included in his writings, the Purva Paksha, the opponent will say, da-da-da-da. Here's my statement, here's the scriptural support, here's what the opponent will say, here's the refutation of the opponent. Here's what they'll say about my refutation, here's the refutation, what they'll say about my refutation. He's very powerful, very thorough, very detailed writer. Very amazing personality. In the course of his stay under the training of Rupa Goswami, he happened to be present. He was actually fanning Rupa Goswami when a traveling Digvijay Pandit means people who was their thing, they would travel from place to place and argue or debate. They'd have their followers and they'd come with their followers and they'd ask who's the most learned person in this place. So he came to Vrindavan and everyone said, it's Rupa Goswami. So he went to Rupa Goswami and I want to challenge you in debate. So Rupa Goswami said, you're too smart. I was a debate. So let's not debate. I'll acknowledge defeat. He said, very good. Put it in writing. You acknowledge I defeated you. So he put it in writing. Because he had no interest to debate with a wrangling person. And then that same scholar, looking around, who else here in Vrindavan is very learned? Jiva Goswami. I'll go debate Jiva Goswami. So he challenged Jiva Goswami in the same way. And when he challenged Jiva Goswami, he said, even your teacher, I defeated him, look. And Jiva Goswami was hurt. That, what's this? So I accept your debate, challenge. And he defeated him. The man was very, very intelligent. It says it took 7 days and he defeated him. It's like he left embarrassed. And Jiva Goswami wanted him to know, he wanted Rupa to know, I defended your honor. And Rupa was not pleased with that. He said, we're not in the business of arguing with mundane, scholarly people about things. So this is not the mood of a resident of Vrindavan. So you should leave Vrindavan. So that's an order from his guru, and he left Vrindavan. But he didn't go too far. He went up the river Jamuna by the side of the city of Mathura, and he was in a very distressed condition, being chastised by Rupa, and told he's unfit, etc. So he started fasting, and it's is described in a consistent way in his biographies. He lived inside a cave that was a crocodile cave, a hole along the side of the river Jamuna where a crocodile would live. That's not necessarily the one, but that's an image. And the people in Mathura came to know there's this sadhu. They didn't know who he was, but he's lean and thin and looks emaciated and very, very sad. So when Sanatana Goswami was doing his Madhukari, home to home, he came to some places where they said, there's this sadhu, maybe you could help him. He doesn't look so good. And so he went, Sanatana following their advice, he went to see, and there it was. It was gone for a long time. No one knew where he went. You know, as far as they knew, he just left Vrindavan, which he did. He went to Mathura. So Jiva was brought by Sanatana Goswami. Of course, there's different versions. But he brought him to Rupa, had him, the version I like is he had him wait outside, and said, according to Lord Chaitanya's teachings, what's the outstanding characteristic of a Vaishnava? According to the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, mercy to the Jiva, Jiva Daya. He said, very good. Here's one Jiva, give him your Daya. And Rupa Goswami embraced him. So there's a parallel, somewhat similar circumstance that's often narrated. While Lord Chaitanya was present, Vallabha Acharya and Lord Chaitanya interacted some, actually twice. Once was in Prayag, the same time that Rupa was there. And another time when Lord Chaitanya went to, when Srila Vallabhacharya went to Puri, they associated there. So they're contemporaries is the point. And similarly, Rupa was a contemporary, and Vallabhacharya had spent some time in Vrindavan. And Rupa Goswami had appreciation for the scholarship of Vallabhacharya. And so he asked him, can you please read over my writings? And if you see something that needs some improvement, you can let me know. You know, like critique it. Not exactly edit it, but give his critique. So Vallabha was appreciative of that kindness, and he did so. And one time, when he was visiting Rupa, he made some comment about his writing in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that he felt was a little off. He was describing, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he was describing the processes of knowledge, cultivation of knowledge, and the cultivation of karma as being like witches. So that was like a little strident, a little harsh. Here's the Sanskrit. Bhukti mukti sprihayavat pishachi hridi vartate. Tavat bhakti sukhas yatra katham. So he was taking exception. He said maybe you want to consider that word, you put a different word in there. And Jiva Goswami happened to be there when he made that remark. And Rupa Goswami said that we consider. And Jiva Goswami escorted Vallabha to the river Jamuna to take his midday bath. And while he was walking, he kind of let him have it. You know, it is the right word. Here's why he said this, this, and this, and this, and this from Scripture. It's the right word. It's an authorized type of word, and it's appropriate. So Vallabhacharya was impressed with Jiva Goswami's scholarship and the logic and argument with which he presented what he presented. So later he came back and informed, your disciple, very smart, very astute, in his study and understanding of the scripture. It is said in the biography, Rupa was not so happy. He said, I've asked him to help me. You don't have any business of correcting him. It's not, this isn't the right Vaishnava achar. He's very senior. He's making a comment, and you have no position to make this remark. Again, Jiva Goswami was just defending the honor of Rupa. It was service. But so it's the position of a teacher or a spiritual master to give correction. And Jiva Goswami wasn't, irritated. Why I said the right thing. It was the right thing. He acknowledged it. He didn't defend himself. He just went forward with his service. Here's the translation. So it stood. Later, Rupa had a conversation with Vallabha, said, this is why I used this word. Here's the authority behind my using that word, and I'd like to leave it. He said, yeah, I think you're right. He heard from both Jiva. So it was friendly and scholarly, but not the other kind of scholarly and critical. So here's the translation of that verse. The material desire to enjoy the material world and the desire to become liberated from material bondage are considered to be two witches, and they haunt one like ghosts. As long as these witches remain within the heart, how can one feel transcendental bliss? As long as these two witches remain in the heart, there's no possibility of enjoying transcendental bliss of devotional service. That's the translation of the verse. Here's a photograph of the Samadhi of Jiva Goswami. It's kind of unpretentious. Those of you that have visited the Radha Damodar temple, it's around the side. When you walk in the front gate, there's the courtyard and there's the temple up there. We'll see a photograph shortly. But you go around to the left and that's where his Samadhi, and that's his bhajan kutir, a sitting place. And they used to have a photograph. Now there's a murti of Jiva Goswami. Here's a photograph of the beads that Jiva Goswami used. And here's the courtyard of the temple, when there's not a zillion people in the courtyard. It's pretty unusual. Here's the altar. And you see it's a pretty busy altar. We're going to see the names of all the deities, but just take a look. There's 4 sets of deities. And notice in the front, right here, there's that's the Shila of Sanatana Goswami. We heard where Krishna put his foot in a Shila to make an impression in the Shila so he could just circumambulate this little Shila instead of the whole of Govardhan Hill when he was in his 90s. So starting on the far left is the deity of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Radha Vrindavan Chandra. And next to them, in the center, the large deity in the center, is Radha Damodar. That's Jiva Goswami's Radha Damodar, with Lalita by the side of Damodar. Damodar and Radharani. And to their side is Jayadev Goswami's Radha Madhava. And you can only see Madhava in this particular photograph. And then far over to the far right is Bhugarbha Goswami's Radha Chanchi Kaniya. Chalchi Kaniya. Chalchi Kaniya. What? Thank you. Kaniya. Thank you. You can say Kaneya, I'll say Kaniya. Here's the full altar again. Another photograph. And you see the Govardhan Shila in the front with a little red cloth surrounding it. Here's a close-up of the Damodar deity. This is not the same Damodar deity that Rupa Goswami worshipped. Rather, the original Radha Damodar deity was taken with many other deities to Jaipur. So this is a replacement deity called the Pratibhu deity. This is the deity in Chandan Yatra. And this is the actual deity that Rupa Goswami made for Jiva Goswami to worship. And it's described, this is another of the outstanding contributions. Remember, from his childhood he had Krishna Balaram deities. The relationship that Jiva Goswami had with his deities was such that sometimes he would sing and Krishna would dance. Sometimes Krishna would play upon his flute and Jiva would dance. There was a very intimate relationship. And here's a close-up of the beautiful features of this deity. At Jiva Goswami also had a place of worship at Radhakund, and this is the altar at Radhakund. And here we see a close-up of the altar, and on the right side of Krishna, or our left side, is Vilasa Manjari Gopi. Vilasa Manjari Gopi is who Jiva Goswami was in Krishna Lila. So along with his 400,000 Sanskrit texts, or in his so many books, those were his principal books that we saw the list of, the 25. His contribution to continue and support the disciplic succession, because traditionally that's a breaking point, but he was there to make it not a breaking point and continue it, in fact. And further the teachings. He was intimately involved in the construction of Radhakund. The person who resided at Radhakund was Raghunath Das and Krishna Das, but it was Raghunath Das who desired to construct, and Krishna sent the man with the funds to do it. Jiva Goswami oversaw. Jiva Goswami also he didn't just had like this scholarly head in the clouds kind of thing. He was very practical. He, in addition to making copies of the Goswami literatures, which was essential, he created a will, because he had intellectual property that was put in his care. The writings of the Goswamis was put in his care. So he created a will to protect it. And he not only made a will, but he made a second will to verify the will. And included who would be the pujari to maintain his deity in his will. Because sometimes after the departure of a great personality, there is some push and shove. And, because he's an important person, he didn't want that. In addition, as many of you know, it's tradition in India that properties are in the name of a deity. It's just kind of understood, but he didn't just leave it to understanding. He made a document filed with the government that it was very clear. The deity is the property. The property belongs to the deity in a formal document. It's very, very practical in many ways, ensuring the longevity, just as Prabhupada did. Prabhupada followed the same principle, the protection of property. One was the intellectual property, and the other was the hard property, the real estate, the land. And of course, for many temples, there's agricultural land to support the deity. So the deity is not in need. So all of that he took care of, along with the 400,000 very elevated verses in Sanskrit. So we're deeply indebted to him. We're deeply indebted to him. And we can see with all those sets of deities on the altar, who did they trust the most to take care of the deity after the departure of a great person? Jiva Goswami. He's very special in many ways. Great, great, great Acharya. So that's the last slide. Let's see if there's some discussion. If anybody wants to cover some point. Yes. Do we have a portable microphone somewhere?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So it was a nice presentation with a lot of pictures. I never saw Jiva Goswami's presentation so elaborate, like what you showed just now. So my question is, words 2.22, it said that that are, what is that called, pishachas, so witches. So my question is, first one is like, so the first one say decide to enjoy the material world, that is understandable, but why does they say liberation is also witch? Because all the Upanishads, the conclusions of the Upanishads end up in liberation. Without liberation, like we cannot get across to the other world which we want to go. So
I understand your question. The answer has to do with the type of liberation that most persons who are seeking liberation are aspiring for. That type of liberation that they're aspiring for is sayuja. It's a negation of the sufferings of material, but it's not the transcendental bliss of a relationship with Krishna. That's what this is referring to. That aspiration for liberation blocks. It's an obstacle for the transcendental bliss, because that's what it's speaking about. Bhakti sukha. It blocks the bhakti sukha, the happiness of loving service to Krishna, because there's no picture of Krishna in that liberation. It's a merging kind of picture of liberation, leaving behind material and entering into the spiritual kind of liberation. Is it clear? It's sayuja mukti, and that's a witch.
That's clear. Your answer is clear.
Okay.
But the one question is like in the Sri Sampradaya side, they talk about Sayuja Mukti. Is that different than what you are mentioning?
I don't know how the Sri Vaishnavas talk about Sayuja. I'm not a Sri Vaishnava scholar.
Okay.
I do know how the Gaudiya Vaishnavas speak about Sayuja. It's right in Chaitanya Charitamrita. You've probably read it. Bhukti, Mukti, Siddhi, Kami, Sakale Ashanta. That's Lord Chaitanya's teaching in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Bhukti, Mukti, Siddhi, Kami, Sakale Ashanta. One's mind becomes ashanta, disturbed, not peaceful, where there's aspiration for any one of those three. It's a negation of material as material. So when liberation is thought of as a negation of material, that's material.
Thank you.
No, I don't know how Sri Vaishnavas use the term. I do know how Gaudiyas use the term. There's many other references in the here's one from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, after he became a Vaishnav, a follower of Lord Chaitanya, because previously he was a follower of Shankara. And when he became a Vaishnav, he came to Lord Chaitanya with a complaint. What's that? Vyasadeva made a mistake. What's that? He describes in the writings of the 10th canto where Mukti Pade Swadaya Bhak in Brahma's prayers. Mukti, Sarvabhauma says, everyone thinks of mukti as Sayuja Mukti. And that's considered hellish. It's Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He's not a Sri Vaishnava, but he's a Vaishnava. It's considered hellish by the Vaishnavas. Why? No service? That's hellish. Mukti, where there's no service, that's hellish. Put me in a straitjacket in a padded cell and call me liberated. No way. No material suffering like that? No way. I want to serve. So he should have said, Bhakti Pade, Sadaya Bhak. And Lord Chaitanya smiled, said, just see. Previously you were opposed to bhakti, now it's anything that's opposed to bhakti, you're disturbed by. But he also gives liberation. Bhakti is on the liberated platform. So, but your specific question is how Sri Vaishnavas view the word Sayuja Mukti. I don't know how they view the word. I know how Gaudiyas view the word. Becoming one with, in the sense of merging, Sayuja. Anything else? Jiva Goswami?
The Russian devotee's name is Gaurav.
Gora Keshava?
Gora Krishna.
Gora Krishna, thank you. That's what you were going to say. Gora Krishna, yeah. Amazing devotee. He presented it in such a complex manner. It took about a year and a half to sort out what he was saying. And once it was sorted out what he was saying, it was brilliant. Anyway, Gora Krishna. Gora Krishna. Anyone else? Yes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So, hearing all the details of all the Goswamis, it feels like we can never repay the mercy, the writings, the profound instructions and teachings we are receiving from them. But Maharaj, today you mentioned that Chaitanya Charitamrita we can read. It's a essence of all the Goswamis writing in...
It's a synthesization. It synthesizes essences. There's more, but yeah, I'm just editing your language. Go ahead.
But Maharaj also mentioned that to read Srimad Bhagavatam thoroughly before start reading Chaitanya Charitamrita.
No, I didn't say that exactly. You can begin reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, but you'll understand it better. It's just like you can start reading Bhagavatam before you've completed thoroughly studying Bhagavad Gita. But you'll understand it better if you've carefully understood Bhagavad Gita. You'll understand Bhagavatam better. And if you understand Bhagavatam better, you'll understand Chaitanya Charitamrita better. You can begin anytime. And you'll be puzzled. You'll find out.
Yes.
What's this? Yes. What's that?
Yes, Maharaj. Yeah. That was my question, Maharaj. Is it because of the understanding that we should read Bhagavatam first?
Well, it's a little bit like, undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate. You can study a postgraduate text, and you'll be puzzled by it.
But I can still read.
It's like that. There's no harm. Read a postgraduate text, and you'll be puzzled by it. But it's truth, or it's whatever it is. It presents the science of the thing, whatever the science of the thing is that you're studying. But the fundamentals make it easier to enter into all of what a postgraduate text is meant to transmit. In Prabhupada's purport says he's kind of made it simple. Even kind of made it simple, it's still really elevated.
Yes.
Really elevated.
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, this is an online question.
Okay, let's go.
Shrita Das asks, Dear Guru Maharaj, one of the questions that came up during the interactive session after the virtual Vrindavan Yatra was, which Goswami inspired you the most? I was contemplating all these Goswamis are very exalted and inspirational in their own way. His question is, are we even qualified to think that one Goswami is more inspirational to me than the other?
No, it's subjective. I mean, they're more subjective to you today, and then tomorrow maybe another one, and the day after is another one. So there's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with that. It's not, you ask a child, of the meal that you just had, which part did you like the best? They're probably going to say the sweet. But they might say, something else, and then the next day they might say something else. And so our understanding of what we like the most may not be so mature. That's okay. If we like it, that's good. How are we doing? Something back here? Yeah?
Jai Shri Krishna Swamiji. So I reading Bhagavad Gita. I want to know what is moksha according to you?
Not according to me.
Means,
According to me, I'm a garbage can. But, according to our Gaudiya acharyas, moksha means different things to different people. It, literally, in the English language, is liberation, or it's cessation of material existence. Now, cessation of material existence can mean different things, depending upon what one understands as beyond material existence. If one understands what's beyond material existence is nothingness, because there are some people that think like that, that's a shunyavadi. It's nothing. What's beyond is nothingness. And then there's others that say, oh, there's somethingness. It's Brahman. Homogenized Brahman. That's another. And then another idea is, no, it's Paramatma, it's local. And then others, it's Bhagavan. And then others, it's particular features of Bhagavan. And others, it's the relationships of loving exchange with Bhagavan in different moods of loving exchange. So it depends what that liberation, what school one is from, and the persons from whom one has heard and taken shelter. There's different conceptions, but the principle, in principle, is cessation of material existence. That's what the word means, moksha.
Okay.
We have something up front here.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Just a question. Yesterday we are discussing about some cycles. So wanted to understand the difference between Suddha Bhakta versus eternal associates of Raja.
What's the difference between the eternal associates of Braja and
Suddha Bhakta.
pure devotees? Shuddha
Shuddha Bhakta.
Shuddha Bhakta. Shuddha Bhakta. Okay. Put the microphone down. Okay. Thank you. Shuddha means pure. Pure means no longer the influence of the modes of nature and no longer the influence of karma. Guna and karma, finished. That's Shuddha. When the modes of nature are there, it's even sattva, it's a mode. And Shuddha is beyond sattva. So a Shuddha Bhakta is one who's beyond the modes and beyond karma. Now, those that are in that category, there's different ones. There's eternally perfect Nitya Siddha Bhaktas, that's the residents of Vrindavan. But there's eternally perfect residents of Vaikuntha. They're not Brijbasis, but they're eternally perfect Shuddha Bhaktas. Then there's Sadhana Siddhas. And they're not eternal associates in Vrindavan, but they may be apprentices of the eternal associates of Vrindavan from the Shuddha position. There may be persons, walking around on this earth planet that are Shuddha. They're not eternal associates in Vrindavan, but they may be beyond the modes of nature and beyond the influences of karma. So Shuddha they mean different things. There is some overlap with the residents of Vrindavan, but the other term is much broader. You follow? Okay, I think we're done. Is there something else? Okay, he's got it. That's it?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh! Last minute, you snuck in.
Hare Krishna Maharaji, I need to see, can you explain how can we become more serious in chanting?
How can we do what?
Become more serious in chanting the holy
More
name.
serious in chanting.
Yeah.
Associate with this devotee. He's very serious in chanting. Sadhu Sangha. You associate with those that are serious and you become more serious. It's very simple. Not rocket science. Just associate. And associate means you hear from and you serve and you try to appreciate their quality. Don't imitate, but try to appreciate and follow the good example. And so then you can read literature that has descriptions by people who are very absorbed and they want to share with you. And you read those literatures and you try to take that message into your heart and make it, part of how you live your life. When the desire is there, then there's many channels you can follow, and they'll all help you. And then you find ones that are most resonate with you, but the principle is sadhu sangha, however you go about it.
Thank you.
I'll share something with you. There's a devotee in Houston whose name is Shama Sundara Prabhu. Shama Sundara Prabhu is a disciple of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and for many years he was the temple president. And he's now turned over the presidency to somebody, and he's just diving deeply into chanting. And he's so deeply into chanting that the community is becoming immersed in chanting. And it's not becoming only that community, but it's spreading all around the country. He has a japa class. I have some devotees that are in this place, that place, the other place. I just happened to mention his name. They want to find out about it. And now their japa is going like this. And they're writing to me saying, I'm not chanting more than 16, but he is always speaking about, chanting more than 16. And I'm not there yet, but I'm really immersed in my chanting. These are people that have been chanting for 10, 12 years. And some have been chanting for a few years. So it's sadhu sangha. He's not the only one, but he's one that I'm very familiar with. And he's not Six Goswami. He's a householder with 2 grown-up children and, temple president knows how to do with things in the world. So he's not Goswami, but he's immersed. You find people that are immersed and learn from those people. They're people. If you want, you'll find those people. Okay. Okay, one more online. And this is the last one, whatever it is.
So Ravi R asks, Hare Krishna Maharaj, is liberation the same as nirvana?
Moksha, it's a similar question to his question. Nirvana is a negation, but there's beyond negation. Nirvana literally means literally means nirvana. Vana means forest, so it's out of the woods, out of the forest of material existence, the complexities of material existence, cessation of material existence. 4 words, cessation of material existence, nirvana. Moksha has the same implication, but it's same as when you have ceased material existence, what comes after that? That's the next question. So there's nirvana, that nothing exists after that. It's nothingness. That's a Buddhist conception. Anyway, without going through it's a similar question to his question. Okay, we're ready for some announcements.
Thank you, Maharaj. So we'll chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra before I just make some announcements. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram,